There are no planned fire drills, so if the alarm activates, please leave the building in an orderly fashion via your nearest fire exit. The fire exit are through the main doors of the hall or the storeroom adjacent to the stage. The fire assembly point is the island in front of the main entrance to the building. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please note that this meeting will be live streamed. Please ensure your mobiles are turned off or to silent, and toilets and hand washing facilities are available in the foyer area. Right, there are no members of the public, I don't believe. Yes, no problem. Oh. Yes, okay. Members, your voice will only be captured on the live stream when your microphone is switched on. Please remember to switch on your microphone when you're invited to speak and switch it off again when not speaking. Voting will be done on a show of hands in line with the Constitution. I will ask for a show of hands for and then against recommendations, and also ask for a show of hands for those wishing to abstain from voting. Can I remind members that we have now commenced the politically restricted pre-election period? Council and committee meetings can continue to be held during this restricted period, but must not consider any business that would be political, and members must not make any political statements. Right, so I come to
Ian's not here.
item 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Ian Ward, Bob Milne, Nick Booth, and Councillor Arthur Williams. Are there any other apologies? I don't think there are. Okay. Oh, no, you're right. So,
Chair, no, we haven't received those.
We haven't received
apologies
an apology
from those members.
so he's absent, I guess.
Yeah.
Substitute members, none have been notified. Non-members attending? No. It's too wet this evening, I suppose. Minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of October 2023. Members, are they agreed? Yeah, you're getting ahead of yourself there. All right. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay, in that case, we come to agenda item 6, the Earn As You Learn Operator Support Scheme, Taxi Driver Apprentice Scheme. I therefore invite Mr. Stephen Greener, the Council's Corporate Manager Licensing, to introduce his report.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I have obviously got the full report as listed in item 6, but to make it a little bit easier as well, I've, same as what I did last time, I actually put the presentation together, which incorporates everything that's in the report, but hopefully in a easy, understandable format. So hopefully the technology is going to work for us. So why are we here discussing the Earn As You Learn scheme? It was to review the effectiveness of the Earn As You Learn scheme, and then we changed the name of it to Operator Support Scheme. The reason for that is when we issued the original badges for the Earn As You Learn scheme, we put a letter E at the end of everyone's badge number. We wanted to know the difference between the Earn As You Learn scheme which was the original year scheme, and then what we implemented with the changes the following year. So we called it the operator support scheme. So we put an O at the end of everyone's badge numbers, so we could actually work out the difference of what scheme that they were part of. So that's why it's called the Earn As You Learn operator support scheme. So I just want to quickly recap around what was the purpose of the scheme. And the aim of the scheme was to increase the number of licensed drivers within the district whilst maintaining the high level of standards required to obtain a license. If you remember that we identified initially following a meeting back on the 18th of January 2022 that there was a reduction in the number of licensed drivers because of the pandemic. People were going off to different occupations, and we saw a reduction of approximately 40% of our drivers. That obviously was having an impact when the businesses started to reopen, that we had lost a significant number of drivers, and there was lots of concerns around people having to wait up to 2 hours for a taxi. So what was the main purpose of the scheme that was originally agreed? That there was a national shortage of drivers since the pandemic. Existing drivers had changed their work patterns and had impacted on the availability on a Friday and Saturday night, and that the trades felt at the time the current restrictions and requirements in place to obtain a Hackney Carriage driver's badge took too long, as this could take up to 6 months. Thanks, Caris. So, what did the actual scheme introduce? Under the drivers, what was their requirements? They'll be issued with a badge, and once completed all the appropriate aspects, except for the knowledge test, they'll be issued with a 9-month private hire driver's badge. Within that 9-month window, they had to pass the knowledge test. Failure to pass the test would result in the driver's badge lapsing. And they would not be able to reapply again for a further 12 months. What was the role of the operators? They would work as a mentoring system, and drivers could only work for one of the 4 main operators. They must assign the work solely within the Rochester district and not subcontract to other operators outside the district. And then the Earn As You Learn badge will place a requirement on the operators to work with the license holder to encourage them to obtain their full badge. Any concerns relating to the drivers must be reported to us as the licensing team immediately. And the drivers will only be able to drive private hire vehicles and only work on pre-booked appointments. What they also, some of them did, will help by means of financial support and assistance in the build-up to their knowledge using their knowledge test scores. So we've got some baseline data for you. I think it's going to be a little bit difficult to read off there, but I've got the information in the reports. So I've taken it back to 2018, where we had a total of 390 drivers. In 2020, we saw an increase to 420 because under the private hire drivers, you'll see that there was a significant increase of over 30 drivers. That was because we took on new school contract work, which related to Southend Council's Vectio team, and we licensed all those drivers at the time. Then the pandemic really hit with the driver's badges. They are issued on a rolling 3-year license, and this is where we started to see the reduction in the numbers. So it dropped from 275 in 2020 down to 231. Following year was 207. That's when we started identifying that suddenly you dropped sort of 60 sort of licensed Hackney Carriage drivers in the space of a very short period of time. Then we started to introduce the Earn As You Learn scheme, and then we had 187 drivers, and our private hire number of drivers then went up. And then in 2024, we've now got 209 Hackney Carriage drivers, 139 private hire drivers, and we've got a total of 348 drivers. So still less than what we had in 2018, but we're a lot closer than what we were in comparison to where we could have been if we hadn't have introduced the scheme. In relation to number of applicants of the scheme, under the Earn As You Learn scheme, we had a total of 68 applicants. 31 of them completed the entire process and managed to get their full Hackney Carriage badge, and 37 didn't meet the requirements. Under the new operator support scheme, like I say, we put an O on the end of the badge number so we know which ones were which. We've had 55 applicants. We've had 11 that have so far completed the process. We have 33 still going through their 9-month period, and 11 have actually not met the requirements and have been removed from the scheme. So the scheme is working and it has really made a difference. In February 2024, we had contact by the Private Hire and Taxi magazine. They decided to write an article around the Earn As You Learn scheme. This newspaper or magazine is a national magazine that is given to every taxi company and also every licensing authority across the whole of the UK. So it's quite unusual for us to actually be approached to do an article. The newspaper approached us because they were aware of the scheme by one of the female drivers that had progressed through the scheme, and she said how much of a difference it had made to her life. The licensing team have been asked to present and speak at the Private Hire and Taxi magazine national conference in May 2024. I haven't said yes or no yet, but we will be there. So if we do, then there'll be a good opportunity to obviously explain how we've done the system and how it's worked. The scheme has been recognised as best practice, and the work with the trade and the members to find a solution and have implemented a successful driver recruitment scheme, which is now being used by other councils, including Basildon, quite locally to us. So it's quite nice that we've actually got the recognition that we were forward thinking as a council, working with the trade to introduce such a scheme. What I'm going to do is, last time we included a little bit of feedback. In the report, I've given you 2 links to 2 videos on YouTube. But what I want you to do is, rather than the operators tell you their experiences, I've just included the 10, or I think it's the 11-minute video of the interviews with the actual drivers that have actually gone through the scheme. What difference has it actually made to them? And I think that's going to be quite impactful. Can everyone see the screen okay?
Can I have your full name, please?
My name is Ghulam Mustafa Johnny.
Yeah. And your badge number?
434.
434. And what were you doing for work before you become a licensed driver?
I used to work in Just Eat delivery job, restaurant job as well.
So you've always been out on the road?
I've always been out on the road.
Yeah, yeah. Why did you become a licensed driver?
It's a good opportunity. I found one of my friends told me to come here, and because of Just Eat and some other job, you have to go to some shops and pick up.
Okay, I think that gives you a flavour, certainly from the people that have gone through the scheme and how that has actually worked and impacted for themselves. As we also have done in the previous report, we've included information from the operators as well about the number of bookings that they've had and the number of bookings that have been actually completed by those on the operator support scheme. So as you can see from the reports, Andrews have had 56,000 bookings between the 1st of July 23 and the 1st of January 2024. Best Tax have had 87,000. Raleigh Cooperative, that's quite a new sort of company, has had 6,000. And then you'll see the percentage of work completed by the operator support scheme drivers, with Andrews at 11.5%, Best Tax at 19.3%, and the Raleigh Cooperative is higher at 43.6%, but they've got a smaller number of drivers, so there's more work that has been allocated to them. So we then, again, very similar to previously, look at where the pickups are in relation to the operator support scheme drivers. That again was discussed last time to ensure that either the pickup or the drop-off was within inside the Rochford district. That was paramount. And as you can see from the figures, for Best Tax, 11,000 pickups were within Raleigh. For the Raleigh Cooperative, 1,655. And for Andrews, 5,103 pickups were in the Rochford, Canewdon and Paglesham area. Andrews covers more of the Rochford and the South End sort of side. Best Tax have got their office in Raleigh, hence the reason why of that split and that sort of separation. So we then looked at alternative options. It has been acknowledged by the trade that the scheme has now actually achieved what was its original intended purpose. Despite the number of drivers still lower than 2019, the number and frequency of passengers have also reduced because of COVID. So since the pandemic, people have continued to work from home, so they're not commuting to London as often into the city. The nighttime economy has also seen a change with the cost of living crisis. People aren't going out as late or as often, or are now actually driving themselves. So even though our numbers of drivers have dropped, the workload has actually also dropped as well. And I think we've got to take that into consideration and into account in relation to decisions. The Licensing and Appeals Committee needs to be mindful that the scheme has achieved the scheme and that it is a difficult career to get into without some sort of support. I think it's been identified. On average, the licensing team see approximately 20 drivers leave the trade each year. And to encourage new drivers to replace those that have decided to stop, it will be a challenge without some type of apprenticeship scheme in place to recruit those new drivers. So we're on to the recommendations. It is to approve the proposed to continue with the taxi apprenticeship scheme in some form, or has it actually achieved, recommendation 2, has it achieved what it was intended to do, and is it time to stop the Earn As You Learn operator support scheme? And I will leave it now to any questions.
More of a statement, really. Thank you for the presentation. As usual, it's brilliant because you always do it. And I think you'd be very good standing up in May to do a presentation on this excellent scheme. So thank you. So it's more of a statement, not a question, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Also, great presentation. I've got a question. Do the people who use the taxis notice or see any difference with the Earn As You Learn scheme to the older taxi drivers who did it the knowledge way?
Yes. The feedback that we've had both from customers but also from the operators as well, they are more respected around the work they had to go through to get their badge. And they're still learning. They will learn all the time. But one of the things that we did do is we put a QR code in the back of every single taxi so that we get the feedback directly back to us in relation to customer experience and responses. We get a lot of feedback. I've seen 3 in the last 2 hours that have come back to us from passengers. And a lot of them are from the Energy Learn operator support scheme, and they are all positive. If there is any negative ones that come back to us, we obviously work with the operators and drivers to deal with those. But I think we've only ever seen 2. It has worked as a scheme and has been very productive.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've got 2 questions. One is that with those that the taxi drivers that didn't complete the scheme, do we know the reason why they didn't complete the scheme? For what reasons? Was it just because that they didn't attend the scheme? Because you have to attend below 70%, then you're off the scheme. But that may not be the reason why. There might have been other reasons. And do we have any allowances of that scheme that would come into play in the way of parental guidance for their children or something like that? Do we have any allowances on that scheme in between their knowledge and learnings from that scheme? Thank you.
In relation to the numbers that didn't attend the knowledge school, there was a few. There wasn't many. I think I can only think of about 5 that didn't complete the process of going through the knowledge schools and didn't attend the 70%, which was the agreement that we had in place with them. So yes, the operators did work with us closely, trying to bottom out as to why they couldn't attend or if there was other factors. Most of them that didn't pass were due to failure of the knowledge test itself. Even though they were trying and we gave them ample opportunities, we even done some verbally with them as well, rather than relying on the computer. It just couldn't go into their mind around the test within that 9-month time period. So it was just unfortunate, yeah, that not everyone managed to get through. But we certainly did try our best to try and work with them.
Is there still a standard scheme for people who want to become a taxi driver apart from this?
Absolutely. We're not stopping new applicants coming through. It's just we stopped the scheme on the 1st of February. I'm trying to remember the date. And we've said, right, that was the cut-off date for any people going through the Energy Learn scheme. Anyone after that, until obviously a decision was made, had to do the old scheme system, which is you have to do everything, include pass the knowledge test before we'll issue the Hackney Carriage Badge. So we're not stopping it. It's just, it takes them longer because they've got to pass the full knowledge test before we'll issue any type of badge.
Steve, with the knowledge test and what have you, it at the end of it, I think it's a 9-month course or whatever that is the case. Is there any possibility to help in the way of getting more drivers is to put it in parcels, to separate it into 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, rather than the full 9-month course and come at the end for the test? I'm just thinking that, you know, we're trying to get apprentices, yes? So what I'm asking is that perhaps it might be an idea to separate everything up and do it in block rather than in one big block at the end. That's my question. Thank you.
I'm aware they do that in London. They break it down, and I'm going to look to Caris because obviously her dad used to be a London taxi driver. So they used to break it down that you had to do certain sections. I don't think the 9 months is the problem unless you're going towards the end. We've had a lot of drivers that have passed within sort of 3 months or 6 months that have been able to get through the scheme quite easily. Yes, okay, the later they leave it towards the deadline, and we've had a couple that have actually passed on the day of the badge expiry, that they put themselves under that pressure. We obviously, like I say, we still work with them as much as we can, and We don't close the door completely because we say to them, you can come back within 12 months. And some of them are still actually learning their knowledge now, even though they've gone off to do another job, because they're passionate about it and want to go through the scheme again in the future. And after the 12 months, then they'll reapply again, and then they'll do the full Hackney carriage test. The way we've got the knowledge test set up is on a computer. It's a multiple choice questions, and they are broken down by sections. We also sit with them. If they've sat sort of 2 knowledge tests, we will then actually have a look at their results. And if there's a certain area that they're falling short on, so for example, if they're not so confident in like Holbridge or Hockley, we can pick that out. So before the next test, we can say to them, actually, you're falling short on these areas. Go and study on this bit. That will actually help you in the long run. So we try and guide them as well. It's not we just sit them in front of the computer and we just sort of leave them.
Yeah, this is, can I come back, Chair, please? Thank you. This is the reason why I think myself that it should be sort of block orientated, so that, as you rightly say, they can come back, but those that fail it and have to come back in 12 months' time to take it, if you've passed certain blocks like 1 and 2, then you come back for the third one. Maybe we should shorten it to 6 months in that respect, rather than leave it for a whole year, because obviously that person he's got a lot of things on his mind, and you know, whilst he's able to sort of carry it through in 6 months and finish the knowledge, if you like, I do think that might be something we should consider, and for you to bring that to the table, like, you know, because I think that with the drivers that we haven't got, we could increase by doing it in block. That's all I'm suggesting. It's something for you to look into perhaps later.
Yeah, I'll just respond to that. Absolutely. If the committee decides to continue with the scheme, then it is open to, is there any sort of changes that want to be made? And that certainly could be a recommendation to reduce it from 12 months down to 6. That's certainly an option. I think the initial sort of question is, are you happy for the scheme to continue? And then we can look at more of the logistics. So, but we certainly will take that on board. Thank you.
Anyone else got any comments? In that case, I I would like to move from the chair that the recommendation 1 is approved. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Mrs. Shaw. Right, the proposal is to approve the proposed to continue with a taxi driver apprentice scheme. Those in favour? Unanimous?
Thank you.
Yeah. Done. Hello. Yes.
Could we have that recommendations of doing exactly that, to put it in parcels and to reduce it down to 6 months, if that's what we have to do?
Yeah, Chair. We've already voted on the recommendation, so I think the officer will take it away and look into that for you.
The second recommendation was to stop the scheme, and we have voted to approve it, so we don't need to do the second recommendation. Right, we'll now move on to item 7, the street trading policy. Is you again, Stephen?
It is. Sorry. I'm doing these 2, and then Caris is going to kindly do the next 2, and then I will do the final 2. So, yeah, so you're not just hearing all from me all the time. So this one is in relation to the approval of the street trading policy for implementation. I've got to add a caveat to that, because it got pointed out to me the other day that yes, you can approve the policy, but I then need to take it to full council after May because of the new cabinet, new committee structure. So I'm slightly asking you to agree it, but sort of amend it at the same time, is that if you do approve the policy, then I will then take that to the next full council afterwards. So please, if you can note that for me. So this one is in relation to the review of the street trading policy. It was originally implemented in 1995 when the council formally adopted Schedule 4 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 1982. Under the Act at the time, we only approved certain consent streets. And I know that we had a discussion around it last time around updating the policy as it was no longer fit for purpose. So a report was presented on the 12th of October 2023, which was the last meeting, to update the street trading policy. And there was a request for a public consultation, which we did. There was a number of questions that also did come out of the last meeting in relation to certain costs of vehicles and how much it will cost to implement certain sort of changes, specifically around ice cream vendors. If you remember, there was lots of conversations around it. So there was obviously a few concerns around having a more blanket approach, but would be interested to see the public consultation. And not only the public consultation, but we also did the consultation with the statutory partners as well. So members' comments, I'll quickly cover these because they were talking about certain individuals' areas. And one of them was around the costings in relation to ice cream vans, because we were talking about seeing whether they could be ULEZ compliant, which basically means that the vehicle has to be Eurocat 5 for petrol and Eurocat 6 for diesel. And the recommendation that we put in was for that to be implemented by the 1st of January 2025. As I said, under the consultation, we did go through that, and I had numerous meetings with an ice cream vendor about the policy. I had lots of conversations around costs of vehicles and replacement vehicles and the policy in general. To give you an idea of the cost of purchasing a brand new ULEZ compliant ice cream vehicle, you're looking at about £68,000 per vehicle. So that's what it costs to comply with it. I also had lots of discussions around locations and being outside schools and the conditions and the requirements around that. And also there was conversations as well in relation to whether if he went to a school PTA event, would we be charging him twice for his vehicle to be licensed and then obviously the use of the land. So we've updated, and there was one other thing which was asked about vehicle trackers. I know there was a discussion before. We looked at it, and the recommendation by our data protection person was actually don't go anywhere near vehicle trackers because you're getting into realms of human rights and breach of privacy and the control of the data. So it was a good idea, but the recommendation is not to pursue the vehicle tracker route. So a lot of the questions were around fees as well. So in the report, under 2.15, I have outlined the proposed sort of fees in relation to what we should be charging. I don't think they're too expensive. So, for example, a mobile vehicle such as an ice cream vehicle would be £80 for a year to cover that vehicle across the district. Okay, if they've got 3 or 4 vehicles, yes, but I still don't think £80 is an extortionate amount of money. If you're looking at having a single pitch, such as just for one day a year, again, £30 I didn't think was too expensive. And then if there was any street fairs or farmers markets, you'll see there is either £100 or £150. There are some areas that I said that we wouldn't charge. Those that are fetes and community events that are solely for charitable purposes, which means that no one is gaining any financial benefit. I can't see why we should be charging if all the money is going towards a charity. If there is someone making a profit out of it, then yes, there should be a charge. Non-commercial car boot sales, again, if they're organised on private land, again, that is down to their own private land. And the sale of articles by residents, occupiers on their own curtilage. We had this a lot during COVID, that people were doing a lot of boot sales on their own sort of front lawns and stuff like that. I don't think that we should penalise them if people are encouraging. I've certainly seen a couple of messages on social media recently looking to invigorate that again. So that obviously we wouldn't look at charging. And the other one is around a roundsman under the legislation. If you are literally going to stop, one that I can think of at the moment is there is a sandwich company that quite regularly goes and visits all the industrial areas, and they literally move on every sort of 5-10 minutes. Again, because they're not stopping for long periods of time, then I didn't think it was appropriate that we should be charging them a street trader's license. One other one that was also excluded, which is peddlers, because that's all, again, is covered by other legislation that's covered by Essex Police. So in relation to the consultation, I'm going to jump to 5.1. A public and responsible authority consultation was conducted using the Engage With Us, which is the new sort of portal system for consultations, and that was up between the 20th of November 2023 and the 8th of January 2024. And the Rochester District Council Economic Development Team also circulated the consultation for all those on their distribution list to try and give a greater number of coverage by businesses. In response of the responsible authorities, Essex Police raised a number of points that they wanted a little bit of clarity around. And what they were asking for was that we follow the very same principles as what we do with the Alcohol Licensing Act. So if there is an objection by Essex Police or another responsible authority, then we will produce a report, invite the authority to come and sit in front of the licensing subcommittee for then the subcommittee to make a decision. I think that's quite a good and fair, open process, and I couldn't see any reason why we wouldn't support that. In relation to the public consultation, there was 87 visits on the consultation. There were 18 downloads of the proposed street trading policy, and we only received one response, which was from the ice cream vendor. As you can see under 5.8, you'll see the response around the cost of the vehicles. We were talking about, obviously, the evasion of privacy under the tracker system. There was some clarity that was requested around if a school would allow them outside their premises. What we said was they have to agree with the school of a suitable, safe location that is not going to cause a problem. And we're not going to have suddenly kids running across the road to try and get to an ice cream van, or an ice cream van parking in a position that's actually blocking a view of a zebra crossing or something like that. So they've got to work with the school to actually get an agreement. There was a question as to whether there was a scrappage scheme that would assist with upgrading the vehicles. I would love it, but we haven't got a pot that we can suddenly provide a scrappage scheme for older sort of vehicles. But what I have looked at the policy, it says that the annual fees that are due will be due every July. So rather than implementing the ULEZ requirement in January, my recommendation is to tie it in with the renewal that's actually in the July. That would be a simple and a solution of moving it forward. So effectively, anyone would be able to apply now that has a vehicle that isn't ULEZ compliant for 12 months, but obviously at that July period, that's when they would have to either have a replacement vehicle or they don't obtain the street traders license and policy. Legal aspect, this proposal is being processed in accordance with the regulations that are under Schedule 4 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 1982. And the plan implementation date would be from the 1st of July 2024. Because of the times we have to put it in front of full council, I think that then gives us a little bit of time to make sure all the measures are in place. And then that is a good timing that it rolls annually from the July to July. Environmental point, there was a discussion around vehicle emissions, and I believe that this street trading policy does go towards trying to obviously reduce the emissions, obviously by making the vehicles ULEZ compliant, and obviously the policy can be reviewed again at a later stage to see whether further changes need to be made. And it may have a knock-on effect under the economy with the mobile vendors, because obviously the cost of then getting a replacement vehicle is significant. But if they're willing to make that investment, they have got some time to build up a little bit of money over the next 12 months to then cover that cost. So going back to the recommendation is to approve the street trading policy for implementation and to approve the charging fees for the different types of street trading licenses. And I'll leave it to any questions.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you for the presentation. Usually it's very, very good. I thought my voice was loud enough, sorry. In our rural areas, I understand there's a mobile pizza going around, and now it's going to be a fish and chip that I've seen. I've been asked about. Where does that fall about where they have to, what the fees, will they have to use this, please, Steve?
Yeah, that will fall under the mobile vehicle fees. And then they will have to obviously comply with the same sort of conditions that we've got around the ice cream, but it will affect also the fish and chip vans, it will affect the burger vans, it will affect the pizza vans. They will all fall under the same category. As part of the application process and the application form, they'll have to select what wards that they want to operate in, because we won't open up just a blanket sort of. Again, we've had some situations in the past with ice cream wars where two vendors want to work in the same area. This gives us greater control, but it also gives us control over the other vehicles as well.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. Where we've got the type of licence in reflection of type B event pitches, as you know, we do hold Trinity Fair and what have you. Does that mean that every one of the pitches will be £150 per day for that pitch, or does that apply just to the person that is organising the Trinity Fair solely in one day as £150? What is the definition of that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, it is purely down to the event organiser to get one licence that covers all the pitches. That's what we have at the present time, and they do that for Trinity Fair. Funny enough, we've got the application going through now for street trading for Trinity Fair. So they're aware of it already. It's not anything really changing. The only difference actually is we've reduced the fee. At the moment, they pay £225 for the street fairs. So this actually is going to bring the fees down, but they're quite used to it. Like I say, it's the event organizer that has to pay the fee to cover all the pitches, not it's a fee per pitch.
And those pitches are sent to you, and if they change at all, then it would be an extra cost to that event organizer for that extra pitch or whatever the case is.
Yes, on the application, it actually states the number of pitches. So, for example, with Trinity Fair, they've stated that it'll be 30 stalls that will be there. If they have to do a variation to that to increase it, then there'll be an admin fee. Okay, it's not listed on here, but there'll be a small admin fee for us to then issue that new licence.
Councillor Squires, comment.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I missed it, but do all mobile pitches need to be ULEZ compliant? Not just the ice cream vans, but like the pizza or the fish and chip?
Yes, in July 2025, that's when the ULEZ compliant will then kick in for all vehicles.
Councillor Lorman.
Thank you. Being the sort of suspicious person I am, the organiser, I just listened to the Rayleigh Fair, for example, Trinity Fair, but it applies elsewhere. Is the organiser allowed to transfer that cost onto the person hiring the pitch from them? So in other words, they could put a fee on to cover that. Would that be correct or not?
Technically, yes. If you have a stall, then they can charge you for that stall, which obviously will then counteract the fee that the organisers are paying. That's part of the profit sort of mechanism that they can have, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Just to sort of further that, so how do we maintain or keep an eye on the fact that they could make that a profit situation?
Unfortunately, some are profit organisations for events. Yeah, that's, like I say, we've got a standard fee that we apply. How they then charge the stall holders, we don't get involved in that side. We are just looking around the safety of those stalls to make sure that they meet the health and safety requirements that we have set, the number and the spacing to make sure that equality, they're not blocking any sort of access to roads or anything like that. So we will do that side. We don't get involved in the logistics around what the companies then do afterwards.
Councillor Efty, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very uneasy about this ULEZ because I think it should be an aspiration. That's the right word, isn't it? Where we should maybe reduce the licence for people who have the 6 and the 5, not just blanket ban. Someone's got to spend 70,000 pounds for a new vehicle, which literally puts them out of business. And we're very rural, and I suppose people quite like fish and chip shops or pizza places coming around to the rural area, and they could lose that. That makes me very uncomfortable, and we're not a ULEZ zone. If someone goes to court and fights us on that, I don't know where we'd stand.
Yeah, like I say, I've used the ULEZ name because it was easier as a reference, but yeah, what we were then just asking for is the same equivalent, is that they are Eurocap 5 or 6. But yeah, if the members feel that actually, yes, you're happy to accept older vehicles, but there's a more of a fee, that's a decision for the group, so.
Anyone else got any? Sorry. Councillor Cross.
Thanks, Chairman. I didn't see anything in the report about a point I made at one of the meetings, which was in particular with ice cream vendors and loud bells, tunes, whatever, returning to the same location every single day, which if somebody's working nights near that location would be particularly aggravating. So I suggested a requirement that it's in there. Okay. I believe it's in there. That's good.
Yeah, just come back on that, just so it does actually say the street trader must move at least 15 metres from the last trading location and do not return within 4 hours. There is also a requirement in there as well around all vehicles must comply with the DEFRA Code of Practice on Noise from Ice Cream Van Chimes, etc. in England 2013. So I did a bit of research. There is some legislation around the noise levels, how often that they can play them and how loud as well. So we've included that within the policy.
Yes, thank you, Steve. So I did spot that one, but the point I was making previously at a previous meeting was the same location every day. So, okay, they can't return to that spot within 4 hours of a single day, but they could still return to the same spot the next day. And that would be particularly goading, I think.
Yeah, I think it's difficult on that one, say not to return within a 24-hour period. I don't know. It could be added in there. The one that I've used is commonly used across a number of councils within the area. So that's why obviously we've got that 4-hour period. But if the members consider that the 24-hour period would be better, then we can certainly amend that before it then goes forwards to full council.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the 4-hour thing on the same day is kind of superfluous. It's academic as far as ice cream salesmen or sellers go, but to return to the same location every day, I think is far more important to exclude that. And if they had GPS trackers fitted, we could monitor it remotely so that doesn't happen, but that's not going to happen.
Councillor FD.
Just 2 points really. One, just Councillor Cross's point, I don't see the point of that because people know where they're going to be every day. And it's like a little shop they've got for a few hours where they can go and get their, wherever they want their ice cream and stuff. So I disagree with you there that if they want to come back next day, I don't see why not. But I'd like to put an amendment in on the, as we refer to it, the ULEZ, not to do a blanket ban, but vehicles that are not compliant have a 20% increase on their licence fee. So we're looking at this again in 2027, is this correct? And we can have an update in, say, 2 years' time to see how many have updated their vehicles to be compliant.
Speak to that amendment.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Shaw was there before you.
Going back to Councillor Cross's point about not going back to the same pitch, then if that's a recommendation, we've got to get rid of A1, single standard pitches. Because surely that's on page 7.5 under 2.15. The type of licence, single standard pitches, is it, I take it, is they can go back to that place every day. And that's why it's single standard. So if we recommend it's, if we've got a vote on this and it is said we can't do it, then that A1 has got to be taken out. Or have I misread it, Steve? Please.
No, like I say, that it is a single standard pitch per day. So technically, yes, they could be there every single day under that. So unless you specifically had the conditions, we have broken it down within the conditions around the type of sites and site-specific conditions, and there is one specifically around vehicles. I'm just quickly trying to find it now. Apologies. Yeah, 7.21, we've got specific conditions relating to mobile vehicles. That would be the only other way that you could sort of condition it as such, would have it under specifically for mobile vehicles rather than in the general sort of site conditions or general conditions.
Right, we've got Councillor FD wants an amendment to increase the fees by 20%. Does anybody second that?
No, can I
Well,
speak to it first? Can I speak
Now
to it?
we speak. I'm not voting on it.
Oh, sorry.
Now okay, thank you. Right, anyone want to speak to that amendment? Councillor Cross.
Yeah, apologies, Chairman, for me jumping in there. I agree with Councillor FD's proposal to a certain degree, but I don't think we should penalise the non-compliant owners of vehicles. You know, that's sort of a double whammy for them. They can't afford a compliant vehicle, and you're suggesting taxing them more. So I would suggest a concession where we reduce the licence fee to those that have got compliant vehicles.
I'm quite happy to accept that. Instead of putting them up, putting them down on my motion.
Does anyone second that amendment to the amendment? Right, okay.
Is it possible, Chair, we can just confirm the wording of the motion so that we're clear about what that is?
Steve, do you want to read it back up until us say put the prices up by 20%? Just change it to put them down by 20% per year, then to review it in 2 years' time.
Sorry. Just want to make sure that, like I say, we get this wording exactly right.
For compliant vehicles, a 20% reduction effectively.
So, yeah, so from the 1st of July 2025, the vehicles that meet the minimum emission standards will receive a 20% reduction in fees. And are we okay with that wording?
And sorry, Chairman, do you want to interject? Just I think Councillor Efty originally put that there would be a review point on that as well. That was-
Yeah.
I think 2 years, because it starts in July, so we get a whole year into it. Yeah.
2-year review.
Okay. Councillor Constable, you wanted to talk to that?
Yeah, it was just that if it went up by 20%, you're talking about £80 a year to £100 a year for a street licence for a trader. I don't think that is a lot of money at all. So I don't think we're arguing about a great sum either way, but 80 to 100 or 80 down to 65. I think for our licensing committee and our fees for the council, I think the £80 would be a fairer fee and a little bit extra for non-compliant vehicles as a bonus. So that's just my opinion. But I would like to stay with the original proposition.
I think, Chairman, we
original
vote,
amendment that-
I think we vote on the amendment first, and if that doesn't go, then we look at it again.
Vote on the amendment. Yeah.
Okay, can we vote on the amendment?
So,
Okay, let me I'll quickly rewrite this.
So that just now becomes an amendment. Then we got to vote on the amendment.
yeah, they go first to see if they agree this, and then what we do is, unless there's any other questions, then what we do is we agree on the original 2 recommendations, but with that amendment. Let's do this bit.
Okay, I think I've got the wording correct. By the 1st of July 2025, those vehicles meeting the minimum emission standard will receive a 20% reduction in fees. This will be reviewed again in 2025. Sorry, 2026, sorry.
Could I just suggest that just says that in 2 years, because if it's adopted
In
from
2
today,
years.
it occurs. I think that was what was originally said.
Yep. Full council. Yes. So in 2 years.
Okay, can we vote on that amendment? Those in favour?
Seconded it.
We've got 3, 4.
Those against?
Those against?
Any abstentions?
Who seconded?
Any abstentions?
2.
So the motion was carried, yes. Okay, so we now move back to the 2 original recommendations, which will, and the new one will now be encompass that. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Stanley?
Thank you, Chairman. Just the point that we was discussing on the returning to the same point of for 4 hours, and it after 4 hours. Well, considering that the music will only be there when they leave school at that time, so the 4 hours really doesn't come into play because they won't be there in 4 hours' time, 8 o'clock. But I would suggest that the hours to return should be the same, but not in the same place. There should be a distance from that place where they parked. I don't know if we can do that at all, Stephen.
Yeah, apologies. I was just looking it up, funny enough, around the requirements around whether they can. It does say the street trader must move at least 50 metres from the last trading location and do not return to that location within 4 hours. So technically 50 metres down the road, would you still be audible from the original location? But like you say, with the schools, then they will move off and they will go round different areas as well. So, sorry, that possibly might not have answered your question.
No, not really. But what generally happens is that even if they was to move 50 metres down the following day, but that's not the 4 hours, that's 24 hours. So what we're saying in effect is that they can still go back to the original place because it won't be in 4 hours.
Yes,
It'll be in
that's correct.
24 hours. So
Yes.
that 50 metres doesn't come into play. And what I'm asking for is that they do not go back to the original place within 24 hours. Can we do something like that? So in other words, they do not go back to the same place the following day. They have to be at least 50 metres away from that place. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. At
Thank
the
you.
moment, yeah. No, that's all right. Yeah, as it says in there, the current recommendation was 4 hours, but it could be 24 hours that you could change that wording so that they can't then return within that 24-hour period if the group agree they want that amendment.
So are you putting an amendment then?
Yes, I'm putting an amendment into that
Which is what?
from 4 hours to 24 hours.
Would it be helpful to me rewrite or reread
Right,
the
right,
condition based on the recommendation? It says the street trader must move at least 50 metres from the last location and do not return to that location within 24 hours.
Do we have a seconder? You want to speak?
Yeah, I'll
sir?
second that.
Should we vote on it?
Yeah. you need to vote.
Right, can we take a vote? Those in.
Chairman,
you want to
speak on it.
Okay, right. Councillor Lawman?
Thank you. I just want to make a comment on that. I just think making a rod for your own back. I mean, the idea, some of these traders return to the same spot because it's the only spot available. You're going to start, causing problems that we don't really need. And also, if we do get a complaint, we're going to end up with our officers going down with a bit of chalk so we can sort of establish from day to day where these people go. I mean, I just find it totally unnecessary. Thank you.
Councillor Shaw?
I'm going to go with ice cream vendors. So they can't trade, so they move up where, but they get there about 2 hours before the kids come out of school. So how are we going to work that one out? And where I'm thinking about, Holt Farm, they will not be able to move anywhere along that road because it is permit parking. We've now made it, Essex have now made it. You can't park anywhere else.
Park there anyway now. So without a
Yeah,
permit.
you've got to have a permit. So are we going to penalise any vendor from setting up before people come to use them? And are we then going to, as I said, are we going to remove A1 out of this table you've done? Single standard pitches. I really don't understand. I can't understand it. I'm sorry.
Are you happy for me to respond to that one? Is that right? There is, like I say, there are conditions around, and again, I had this conversation with the ice cream vendors as well, around two conditions. One is that they cannot wait in one location for more than 30 minutes unless serving customers. So they can't suddenly turn up 2 hours before to try and find the best location to be because they have to then move off. So that was one of the conditions that I did talk about with the vendor, but actually he agreed that that was the right thing to do, that actually that will stop people turning up sort of 2 hours before, because they would have to be forced to move away. But the other condition was that if they must not trade within 100 metres of the boundary of any school or college between the hours of 7:30 in the morning and 6 at night without formal agreement from the education establishment. That again was key for us, was that actually if the school says, yes, it's fine for you to park in that area for a period of time, then that was something that they had to work together on. But yeah, I see it with my kids' school is that the ice cream vendor can turn up at sort of 1 o'clock in the afternoon and will then sit there running their engine, keeping it going while they keep the ice cream churning over. And that was one of the things that we were obviously keen to try and stop, was that those fumes literally just being kept outside the schools. Hence the reason why we put in there about that 30-minute requirement.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to agree with Jack on this. If they go talk to a school and the school says you've got to park there because it's got good sight lines and good visibility, and that's the only safe place, we shouldn't be making it so they can't come back in 2 days for a whole day. I think, as Jack says, it's just a rod to break our back. I think, but we'll go to the vote and see how it pans out.
Councillor Cross.
Well, it's partly been answered. I'm just thinking of the scenario where an ice cream van turns up the same location. If that's outside your house and you happen to be working nights, and he turns up every single day at that location with the tunes playing, that would drive me crazy. But then again, if the resident goes out and says, "Look, this is the situation. I work nights," so I think a compromise could be reached, and maybe he moves a little bit further down the road. But I agree with Councillor FD. Obviously, a safe place near a school needs to be found and kept to. Agree with that.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. It doesn't say, or we're not saying that he cannot return 2 days later to the same position he was on the first day. It's just that to move him away and then come back will actually give time and response for that person that is at night, sleeping during the day and doing night work. It's just to give him a break. And I think that's where the council needs to be, in thinking that our residents do need that. And so we should adhere to, or try to make it nice for the residents. Thank you.
Councillor Lawman.
Thank you. Yeah, I've spent 30 years doing shift work, nights and so on. And I had builders and everything. I didn't get them moving every 24 hours. But otherwise the house would never have got built next door. But more to the point is that I think we're better off from a PR point of view as well if we leave it to the officers. So if we do get a complaint, they deal with individual complaints, then we deal with that appropriately. I really think we're starting to really muddy the water here, and I can't agree with it. Thank you.
Mr. Constable.
Yeah, I think the 4-hour rule is the right way it should be, because they could pull up outside a playground in the morning, but that means they can't go back to that sort of play area in the summer for another 24 hours, whereas they would like to maybe come back in the afternoon and pick up the afternoon trade. So having a 4-hour period on anything is wrong. And why can't they come back every 24 hours or within 24 hours? I hear them from my house. There's an estate behind me, and I hear the ice cream van going round for about an hour because he keeps stopping, and you can hear the sound travelling. It's one of those things. It's part of summer. And again, if you're a night worker, you could be doing a job that disturbs everybody else's sleep, like the bus driver that pulls up outside my house every 20 minutes. So we can't really legislate for night workers and everybody else that works shifts.
Okay, I think we've exhausted this because we need to come to a vote. I can't remember where are we on this latest.
Do you want me to reread the proposed amended wording? The street trader must move at least 50 metres from the last trading location and do not return to that location within 24 hours.
Right, have I got someone proposing that?
It's been proposed and seconded.
And have we done that?
It's already been proposed and seconded,
It's
Chairman.
already, sorry.
Yeah, so it's just to the vote. I think.
Okay, those in favour?
Two.
Those against?
5.
Those abstaining?
One abstention. It's not carried.
So that's carried. Yeah, okay. Noted.
And mine then.
And Councillor Cross as well, please.
Shouldn't we have done that before the vote?
No, no,
Doesn't matter.
no, no.
Doesn't matter. Right, so we now have two they're recommendations, yes. So what we do, we go back to the original?
So, yeah, we're going to the original motion, obviously, with the amendments. But if we can just ask my colleague Matt to check with Steve to make sure what we're agreeing to before members vote, I think would be sensible.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Through you, if I read what I think we have, I'll ask Steve to just confirm some of the details that I've sort of inserted. And then if you're happy with that, Chairman, we'll then put the two substantive recommendations to the vote. So the first recommendation in the report is ultimately unamended. It's to approve the street trading policy for implementation. The second recommendation has been amended by Councillor Efty's amendment. And this is because the amendment ultimately relates to the financing of these licenses. So the wording I have is to approve the charging fees for the different types of street trading licenses, with the exception of peripatetic street trading conditions, such that from the 1st of July 2025, vehicles which reach emission standards as set out within the report, paragraph 7.21, will receive a 20% fee discount, and that this arrangement be reviewed 2 years from its adoption. So I'll just ask, Steve's nodding that seems to confirm the right details in the report. So those are the recommendations that the committee has, Chairman.
I'd like to propose that recommendations are accepted.
Okay, got that? Okay, those in favour?
It's unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous, motion carried. Right, we now move on to item 8, Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Card Payment Facility.
Okay, so this is for the committee to approve the inclusion of the following requirement in the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Policy. Yes, sorry. Is that better? Thank you. Is to approve the inclusion of the following requirements in the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Policy. That all licensed Hackney Carriage and Private Hire drivers must provide a card payment facility as a minimum, and devices should accept chip and PIN, contactless and magnetic swipe payments. To mandate acceptance of Visa and MasterCard payments as a minimum, but drivers may also choose to accept other cards such as American Express and Diners Club. And to approve clear signage visible from the outside of the vehicle to make clear that all taxis now accept card payments.
Right. Councillor Efty?
Can I suggest, Chairman, we go straight to the vote on this? It seems very straightforward. I don't see why our residents should be penalised if taxi drivers don't accept car payment machines.
I'll second that.
So you're proposing the recommendation, you're seconding it. Right, those in favour?
It's unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous, motion passed.
Okay, this is a request to approve the inclusion of the Blue Lamps Trust virtual classroom course for disability awareness training for our licensed drivers. Currently, we have 4 approved trade-in providers for the disability awareness training, which includes passenger assistance training, and these are all carried out face-to-face. With the inclusion of the virtual classroom course, this would allow drivers the opportunity to complete the training remotely, which would be beneficial for drivers working outside of the districts on jobs that take them away for long periods of time. We do have some restricted private hire drivers that work away on film sets and things like that, so they can't always come back to the district to do the approved face-to-face courses. We do have a virtually approved course which is provided by the Blue Lamp Trust, which is for the safeguarding course. This was introduced in September 2022 and it's been quite successful so far. So the recommendation for this one is to approve this course. There isn't any financial implications as the fee would be charged directly to the drivers, but it would prove beneficial for those drivers that aren't able to meet the face-to-face.
Yeah, Councillor Shaw.
It's good to have this, but just one, do the drivers get trained in special educational needs? Or I know that is usually another sort of vehicle, but if you have someone that has a special educational needs child, are these drivers actually going to be taught, trained? Thank you.
I'll assist Caris with this one. Yes, it's part of the course. It talks about the Equalities Acts and it also talks about visible as well as hidden disabilities. Part of the course also includes the different assistance dogs, what's the different jackets mean and all sorts of things, and how people react differently to different behaviours. So that is all included in the virtual classroom course.
Thank you very much for clarification.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. As being somewhat in the past with disabled people and children especially, I believe that the driver will have a operator, if you like, or somebody in custody of that child in the taxi. They won't be in the taxi themselves. They will have a company with an insured person that does that sort of thing, looking after the occupant. Do we need, again, I don't see the need, as this comes under our course as well of knowledge, do we need to charge the drivers for this course, as it's already there? And I do believe that there is some action by the licensee, the taxi firm, that does actually do a course on welfare of the child. Thank you.
Okay, I'll answer that one. We have always insisted that any driver that is completing the course always pays it themselves. We've had that all the way through the start. It's the same with the safeguarding course. They always pay it individually themselves. In relation to what you mentioned around the school contracts and the SEN children being transported, a lot do have sort of chauffeurs and sort of support people in the vehicles, certainly on the larger sort of minibuses. But we're seeing more and more of our taxis actually now being used to transport people to school, and they don't have the chaperone. And we're seeing that more often because then it's a lot easier to use a taxi driver than it is to get a big minibus with multiple point pickups. So we are actually seeing a change in the way that it's being run across both Southend and other parts of Essex as well. So a lot of our drivers now do school contract work, a lot. So when we ask around this training, again, what we're asking for is no different from the training they're already having to do. This just provides them with an additional provider that they can then opt to do it remotely rather than having to do the face-to-face training.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, is there anybody else? No, right, so shall we move to a vote?
Can we just, I don't know who one's moved the motion and seconded it.
To approve the inclusion of the Blue Lamp Trust virtual classroom course for disability awareness training for our licensed drivers. Top of the next page.
I'm happy to second that, Chairman.
Right. Got that?
Yeah, just need a second.
Yeah,
I'm
Councillor
happy to
Essex,
second that.
thank you. Okay, those in favour? We're unanimous, that's carried. Okay. And we're just approaching 9 o'clock. Does anybody want a comfort break?
If you mind, Chairman,
Right,
5 minutes or so.
can we break for 5, 10 minutes, 10 minutes? Yep. 9:05. Thank you. Okay, resuming the meeting. We now move to item 10, the approval of Hackney Carriage and private hire drivers' vehicle and operator fees.
Okay, thank you very much. You're back to myself again on this one and for the final one. This one relates to the fees that the council charge the trade. The one afterwards is what the trade charge the public. So we're talking about our fees first under item 10, and then item 11 is the charging of the public fees, just so we're clear around as we go through it. There's lots of stats and figures and all sorts of things. So I've done, again, a sort of a breakdown sort of presentation, which I've put under Appendix 1, which you have got. This is the presentation that I provided to the trade, explaining about how the fees have to be legally structured and why the fees had to go up. That's the reason why I've included it for you, and I think it's easier for me to then do the same presentation to yourselves so that you can to understand what we're going through. So, first of all is the legislation. Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 1976 says that in providing the licensing function, the council, under its provisions of the 1976 Act, is entitled to levy fees to recover the reasonable costs associated with the costs of the issue and the administration of driver's licenses, inspections of vehicles for grant and renewal of those licenses, costs in connection with the control and supervision of Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles, and with the exception of driver's licenses, the council is required to consult upon the fees it intends to levy through a public notice procedure. Because we are doing the driver's license fees, we did do a public consultation on this as well. And the final comment is under the local government guidance councillor's handbook, it says, in determining the fees to be charged, it would be reasonable to do so with a view of achieving full cost recovery. So what does that mean? So licensing income from the scheme must therefore be ring-fenced, and that the licensing fees and charges cannot be spent on any other of the council's activity, and we can't even use it on any other part of the licensing business. If you remember from my training very early on, remember me talking about you being a company director, you are responsible for the taxi licensing, determining the fees, determining the charges that you make. And that's the reason why it says in the guidance of the council's handbook, it has to be ring-fenced. We cannot use this money for anything else. As a councillor, you should ensure that your authority's budgets can stand up to scrutiny by the district auditor and under the Freedom of Information Act. A periodic review of the licensing service processes and procedures can also help to improve this as well, but there is no statutory timescales. What we tend to do is we tend to do it on a rolling 3 years. That's a common sort of process that is known as the sort of the best practice, and we'll cover that as we go through. So we needed to use a benchmark in relation to our number of licensed drivers that we've got. And I chose the date of the 1st of November 2023. The reason for that is I then had to calculate all the fees. Then I had to do a driver consultation. Then I had to do a public consultation before I then present it to you, before it then goes off to full council. So I had to set a deadline. And you're asking why it was so far away in the 1st of November, but that was the reason why we had to choose that date. So at the time, we had 192 Hackney carriage taxi drivers and 136 private hire drivers. Under licensed vehicles, we had 165 Hackney carriage vehicles and 118 private hire vehicles. And then we had 54 private hire operators. So we'll use that information to then calculate the fees because it has to be separated out accordingly. So what is the running cost of having the licensing department? We got this from finance over an average of a 3-year sort of finance. They've calculated that £103,833 is direct costs for staffing. Transport costs is 300, Supplies and services, they're including the plates, the printers, the ink, all the bits and pieces that we need to use, is £8,788. And then the support services, which is £101,385. It's a total of £214,306. What I've done is I included the breakdown on the right-hand side of the recharges in relation to the support services, so you can actually see what it relates to. Sorry, I'll just hit the microphone. As you can see, there's some quite significant fees that are charges in relation to recharges. So the ones in red, I identified that were not taxi related. Those that relate to emergency planning, estates management, health and safety, admin buildings, and I apologise for the people in the room, but the assistant directors and directors do not have direct involvement in the taxi licensing side. And I have therefore removed those for them to be covered by the other licensing areas, such as the alcohol, gambling, scrap metal, all the other bits and pieces that we have as statutory fees that we have to charge. Therefore, that brings the support services fees down to £53,003. And the total figure then is £165,924. Okay, so we then move on to that's what it costs to run the licensing team, apart from obviously the support services that we've already sort of highlighted and discussed. 70% of our officer time is spent on taxi licensing. Therefore, 70% of our direct staffing costs, transport costs, and supplies and services costs should be paid for by the trade. And therefore, we've reached a total figure of the 132,048. Does that make sense so far? Okay. Like I say, lots of figures, but hopefully we'll get our heads around it and we can work our way through it. So why do we need to break down the costs? Well, there was a legal case against City of Wakefield Council and the Local Government Association in 2019 that the judge said that the cost of monitoring and enforcing drivers conduct cannot be taken into account in fixing the vehicle's fees. So you can't use the vehicle fee money to pay for the enforcement on the drivers, which makes sense. As such, the cost, we considered that the wording of Section 70 in the context of the structure of the 1976 Act leads clearly to that conclusion, irrespective of the proper interpretation of Section 53. We also consider, however, that the costs can be included in the driver's licence fees under Section 53. So, driver's fees can be charged under Section 53. They can't be charged under Section 70, which relates to vehicles, but you can charge it under driver's fees. So that's why we have to break down from driver's fees, vehicle fees, operator's fees. We have to separate the whole lot out. So what is our current expenditure at the moment if we base it on the officer time that we spend in relation to dealing with private hire drivers, private hire vehicles, operators, Hackney carriage drivers, and Hackney carriage vehicles? We've broken it down onto the right-hand side, so you'll see the percentages. So we spend 17% of our time dealing with private hire drivers, and we deal 19% of our time with Hackney carriage drivers, 29% of our time with private hire vehicles, and 31% of our time with Hackney carriage vehicles. What we have discussed already is that the reason why our vehicle license percentage is higher is because the vehicle licenses are due every year, whereas the driver's badges are due every 3 years. So officer time on drivers actually is going to be less because we're only seeing them once every 3 years over a 3-year average, whereas we're seeing the vehicles 3 times during that time period. So that's how we've calculated it. And again, on the current expenditure, the breakdown of the 132,048, you'll see that I've included on the right-hand side around how each of them is broken down. So if we stay on our current fees, as we are at the moment, how much income are we going to have? So we've calculated, if we stay on as we are, that we will have an income of £91,430 overall, over those average of that 3-year period. But look at our percentages of the amount of time or money that we're charging based on the officer time. We are wrong in relation to our private hire vehicle fees and Hackney carriage vehicle fees. At the moment, Hackney carriage vehicle fees are charged 50% of our charging fees. So we've got that wrong. So we need to realign it to make sure that we're charging the correct amount according to the amount of time that we spend. So we come on to the proposed income for 2024 to 2027. Like I say, we'll do it for a 3-year, but what it also means that it's based on a 3-year average income, but we still do a interim check to make sure that the budgets are still online. So we're not saying that we won't relook at it until 2027. It means that we will check it again just to make sure that we're still on target in 2025 and 2026 to make sure that we're still hitting the targets that we need to hit. So we need to obviously increase our fees, but the proposal is that we don't increase it to do a full cost recovery. And everyone's going to look at me blankly as to why are we not doing a full cost recovery? And I've had this conversation is, like I say, we should review the fees every 3 years. The last time the fees were reviewed was in 2017. If I increased the fees when they were due in 2020, we were in the middle of the pandemic, we would have knocked out the entire taxi trade. So we're looking now at the new fees for 2023/2024, which now ties in with the review that we've started to do. Again, if I do full cost recovery, I think that that will massively, we're jumping too far. We're doing 2 sort of 6 years gap in a short period of time. So by us sort of reducing the charges slightly, we are still going to be charging 123,000, and I've got a summary sheet at the end as to how much that compares. That brings us closer to what we were than what we're currently on, because we're only charging 91,000 at the moment. So we're looking at increasing our income by 30,000. So different fees, you can't read that one, but it's in the slide here. What I've got is what the current fees are and what are the proposed fees. So the Hackney carriage vehicles, I've kept the fees exactly the same at £280. At the moment, we do a reduction in fees for wheelchair accessible vehicles. I've upped that to 280 because we spend the same amount of time on normal Hackney carriage saloon vehicles as we do as wheelchair. So it should be charged exactly the same. And it's the same for the private hire vehicles and private wheelchair private hire vehicles. Again, we should be charging exactly the same because the officers spend exactly the same amount of officer time on those. The big change is the ones that you'll see in red if you've got a colour version or a black and white version. It's the ones down the bottom. It's where we're going to jump quite significantly with the driver's fees because we've got the wrong proportionate fee at the present time. So the driver's fees for a new applicant, we currently charge for 1 year £70. That's going to jump to £183. And then if it's for private hire only, it'll jump from £60 to £183 because, again, we spend the same amount of officer time. If it's a free badge, it's going to jump from 140 up to 400 for a new applicant. Like I say, quite a significant jump, quite a significant impact. And if it's a renewal, because they don't have to do the knowledge test, it's reduced the fee by £50 because we don't spend as much on the renewal time. And the private hire only grant fee, again, is 400 and 350 for the renewal. So quite a significant jump and quite a significant difference. So in summary, what I've done is I put it all into one chart because I thought it was easier. Our current expenditure is 132,048. If we stay where we are, then we're going to get an income of £91,430. If we go for the proposed structure, we'll push it up to £123,323. So basically, if we stay where we are, potentially us as a department are going to lose £40,618 a year over the next 3 years. Like I say, I presented this to the trade. I was waiting for a lot of backlash, but when I actually sat down with them and went through it with this, showing them the full breakdown, they understood that we couldn't continue the way that we were, and they understood the fees. So we then did a consultation. I did a number of meetings. I did 6 with the different operators, with the trade to get that first. And then I did a formal consultation through the public that we had to do as part of the legislation and the requirements. So the public consultation started on the 22nd of December 2023 and concluded on the 30th of January 2024. An article was placed in the Evening Echo newspaper on the 28th of December, again in accordance with the legislation, to say that obviously we were amending the fees. During that consultation period, we had no comments at all from anyone, not the drivers, not from anyone at all during that consultation period. The next step, obviously, is to present it to you to say, we need to amend the fees. I don't think we can continue as we are. And then, again, very similar to the report, it got flagged up to me the other day. The recommendation I need to do is, because it's going to affect the budget, is to put it back to full council at the next meeting to say to be implemented as from the 1st of July for the new fees to take effect. And any questions?
Councillor FD.
Thank you, Steve. I've got absolutely no problem with this. But what I would say, the only thing that makes me a little bit, not really hesitant, but maybe help the drivers out with the ones that are really big jump at the bottom. So like from the £20 to 350 and the 120 to 400. Have they got to pay that all in one go, or can we do it over time?
We can look at whether they can do a payment plan system. Like I say, it is a big jump.
Yeah.
The trade are aware of it. They initially thought that it was going to be coming in from the 1st of April. So, but because obviously, like I say, it has to be signed off by full council, we've now pushed that back to July. Like I say, they are aware of it. We will look at options for those that are struggling financially if they need support. We need to be in that position because, like I say, it is a big jump.
It is a big jump, yeah.
But like I say, the trade have accepted it. They've acknowledged it, that they have to accept it. And like I say, there was no comment, there was no opposition from the trade, which, to be honest, really surprised me. I was expecting some sort of response or backlash from it, but they've had this same presentation. They fully understand why the fees have to go up that much.
As long as we can understand that some people might find that jump such a difference.
Yeah.
We can help them out a little bit, that'd be good.
Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
Yeah, I can agree with Councillor FD that I think we need some sort of plan so to help them out. But my query is, the current expenditure is 132,000. If we agree to the proposed fees, it's 123. So it's 8,725 short. What are you going to cut down in your service in the office for that shortfall? Because you're doing a really good service for our trade, taxi drivers, private hire. What are you going to cut down? Because you've got to cut something down. On what is it, please?
Yeah, we've looked at it. We're already to the bone with staffing and numbers. What isn't necessary, I don't know if I did actually include it in here, is that if we stay as we are on our fees, we're going to be even worse off. £40,000 a year, which potentially could pay for additional staff, additional officers. And I'm not putting Steve on the spot on this one, but that money could then be used to do some of the extra work that we should be doing that we're not doing, some of the enforcement work. So actually, we're looking at it the different way, is that we will still be short, but actually we'll be better off than what we are now. And then we'll have to have a look at where we stand. Like I say, we'll review it again next year around the fees as to whether that's worked. we had to base it on the certain number of drivers and vehicles that we had at the time. I can tell you now we've had a lot more drivers and vehicles, so the deficit actually is smaller because we've had more income coming in. It's a predicted income.
It's not really answered my question, sorry, because I'm a figure-minded person. You're going to have to cut something. I know it's better than losing 40 grand a year or not having it is and only having 8,000 a year. Fine, but what are you going to cut? Because you're going to have to cut if you run at 132,000 efficiently. And then we're going to cut it down by 8,000. Are we going to ask that the budget is going to be amended to do the... Councillor Cross is shaking his head, but I don't know if he knows that fact. Are we going to actually ask that the budget is actually amended to show that unfortunately there's going to be a shortfall in your working area?
I believe the budget has already been set on the existing fees. So that has already been assigned and allocated. It's purely because we've done the work that we've looked into it a lot more detail and found that we're actually of that shortfall. So if it isn't approved, we would still have to run with the 40,000 deficit, which is what we're not keen to do. I think this is certainly a stepping stone to get us back there, and then we will progress to get to full recovery. I think we just got to accept that we're going to have to take the hit for certainly the first year, maybe the second year, that we are still going to be in a shortfall, but we're in a better position than what we were.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. I do understand that the more taxi drivers we employ will decrease the expenditures that we now have found. But as what's been said, when you've got more taxi drivers, you will have to involve more time, and that's a cost. So on the one hand, you're asking for more taxi drivers, and on the other hand, you're cutting your costs, or you're increasing your costs, should I say, but you're not increasing the costs for the new taxi drivers that are coming in, that the extra work you're going to have to put in. I can't quite get that. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't pan out in the way of cost related, because it will cost us more if you get more taxi drivers. And therefore, I still, and we're still going to be a bigger deficit than what we've got already. Am I right or am I wrong?
It's hard because we can't predict what's going to happen with the number of vehicles. We have to use a static sort of number that we've worked out how many vehicles we've got, and that's why that was in there to work out officer time, breaking that all down to then calculate the fees. So yes, we're obviously going to encourage more vehicles, more drivers, does generate more income. And then, like I say, it's going to give us more work as officer time. But that's when we then have to look at a review of the department to say, with this additional income, do we need to look at additional support, bringing in extra officers to then cope with it? So it's sort of a knock-on effect that we had to do something. We couldn't leave it as it was. And like I say, by increasing the fees, I know that it's doubled the fees. So any new applicants coming in would now have to pay the £400. So we will then obviously use that. We can't make a profit, can't make a loss. So we'll have to evidence to the trade where that extra money is going. One of the things that we have included in there is that because I haven't been able to bring the Hackney carriage fees down enough, one of the things that we will incorporate is the taxi marshals during Christmas within that fee structure. So yes, okay, we can't give them the money back, but we've actually used the money in a different way to then give them some benefit from it. So, like I say, we've worked very closely with the trades, looking at every little bit of the aspect around the finances. We've all agreed this is the best that we can do at this moment in time, but it is a prediction. And that, like I say, more drivers, more vehicles we're going to need more assistance.
Okay, councillor Cross. I'm sorry, do you want to come back? No. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chairman. In answer to Councillor Shaw, the reason I was shaking my head was because I thought you were making a political point. And we said at the beginning that no political point scoring was going to be attempted under
Point
PERDA
of order,
rules.
Chairman, I wasn't making a political point at all.
Well, you were suggesting that the budget wasn't going to be balanced.
No,
because
I
of-
didn't. No, I actually asked.
I think that was the inference. you
No,
were-
it wasn't.
you were
I was
suggesting.
point of order. I was actually asking if the budget had to be amended. That's what I was asking, because we had a shortfall in the licensing. I didn't say we hadn't got a balanced budget, because I know we have. I just
Good.
asked if it had to be amended. That's all I asked. Thank you.
Okay, I think that clarifies it.
Okay, well,
Councillor Squires Coleman.
I haven't made my point yet.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to ask Mr. Greeno if he thought that the figures in respect of cost of running the department would stand up to scrutiny by auditors, and how confident are you in these figures? Because this is key to the charges going forward. Thank you.
I can confirm these were actually provided by the finance team to myself as the breakdown that was used. Funny enough, we did had a freedom of information request in relation to these figures, and it did stand up to an FOI inquiry from another authority. So, yes.
Thank you.
I'll come to you in a second, because we've hit 9:30 and we need to consider whether we are going to overrun. So I propose that we continue the meeting for another half an hour. Does anyone second that? Thank you. Those in favour? Yeah, unanimous, right? Okay, carry on. We'll review this again at 10 o'clock. Right, Councillor Squires Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just, because I just want to be clear on what I'm going to vote, or how I'm going to vote. Just referring back to Councillor FD, talking about maybe staggering payments, because I do understand that this is a big jump. I'm just not sure how that would be administered and what the criteria would be, who makes that criteria, and if that puts more work on officers would then increase, the makes the balance out of kilter again.
It would. It will give us more workload to do. But what we do is we always send out the letters 2 months in advance, and we can add a caveat in there around either that we can do a payment plan that we can then log on our system, or the full payment. The other option that the drivers have got is that they can obviously go for the 1 year driver's badge rather than the full 3 years. So they have that option as well if they want to opt for that option.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right, Councillor Stanley.
The 1 year's driver's contribution, if you like, I'll call it that, would that increase for the 3 years because they're making payments over 3 years, or does it stay the same? Because we are looking at a 3 year thing and not a yearly one, aren't we? So we don't know what the interest would be or anything like that. So are we clear that what we're putting through per annum for the drivers?
Yeah, we've got there both. We have got a 1 year driver's badge, so they can opt for that and then they can renew it each year, or they can go for the 3 year badge. So they've got both options that they can do, and it'll be purely down to them to make that decision as to what is most profitable for them. It'll be their choice.
Do you need a seconder, Chairman? Happy to do that.
Could you use the mic, please?
Sorry. To approve the changes of the licensing fees in accordance with legislation. I'm
Second.
proposing it, seconded by councillor FD. All those in favour? Unanimous, carried. Thank you very much indeed. Right. We now move to the other side of the coin. Item 11, application from the taxi trade to amend the Hackney Carriage tariff fees.
Okay, thank you very much. This is the last report of the evening. It's quite a complex one again, but I'll try and talk you through it as much as I can. I certainly spent a lot of time looking at the proposal. So the report and the summary is the committee is requested to consider the amendment to the existing taxi tariff chart to the proposed changes to amend the charging tariff from the existing 3 tariffs to a new proposed 5 tariffs. The recommendation is really just to approve the proposal. I think recommendation 2, if you don't approve it, obviously is an obvious one. So, as always, we are responsible for amending the existing taxi tariff charts under the legislation. The last increase was approved by the Licensing and Appeals Committee in July 2022 and implemented on the 1st of September 2022. This application by the trade is quite a significant change in the charging structure and increases it from the existing 3 tariffs to 5. And in accordance with the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act, the licensing team have followed due process and consulted with the trade and the public over the proposals, and we're now at the final stage of the process in obtaining the support from the members, either to support it or to object it. So on the 11th of December 2023, an application was submitted by the Rochester District Licensed Taxi Trade to amend the tariff charges based on the information provided. And the information they've given is broken down into a number of sections. So it's around the cost of the fuels, increased costs and labour parts of the vehicle, and just the legal running costs of a Hackney carriage. In relation to purchasing vehicles, insurance costs, and what the average insurance for a vehicle now is has significantly increased. And they've outlined there why obviously the insurance costs have gone up over the previous sort of year or so. Increased car prices has been highlighted in their report around buying a car has become a lot more expensive, certainly for the older vehicles that are not electric or hybrid. And again, they've included a report in relation to car sales and the average costs and the overall cost of purchasing vehicles. They've also highlighted about the used car market has also seen a significant increase. And then it goes on around the car loans. A lot of the taxi drivers buy their vehicles under a loan scheme. And again, they've seen a significant increase in the APR. Has gone up from an average of 8% in 2022, and it's now 10.9%. Which then leads on to, they've given an example of what an average sort of £20,000 loan would cost. Previously in 2020, it would have been about £24,000. Now they're talking about £26,000. We've mentioned already around card payments, and what they have identified is that with certainly payments that are made of a fare, for an example, they've used here, if a fare was about £4.80, people would normally give them a £5 note and normally say, keep the change. Or if it was a £17 fare and they gave them a £20 note quite regularly or quite often, again, they'll be told to keep the change, which again was considered a tip. For a card payment system, a lot of people that do contactless don't necessarily tip as much, and sometimes they will just pay the payment that is made, and therefore they have identified or they believe that they will be losing form of income. As we've discussed around the Hackney carriage fees increasing as well, potentially, they obviously have identified that as that's going to have a knock-on effect with their income, and therefore they've asked for that to be taken into account when considering the new tariff. In comparison with other areas and other roads, they've done a comparison in relation to Basildon's tariff, and also they've also looked at where they sit regionally and nationally using the Private Hire and Taxi magazine. They provide a list of everyone's tariff for a 2-mile journey. At the present time, they are listed at 231 out of 340 on the list. This new proposal will bring them about 81st, sort of 80, mid-80s in the new sort of structure of the tariffs. In relation to alternative options, there is no alternative options that are being suggested. It is either the proposed chart that is being proposed, either accept or refuse. There is not any sort of suggestion of amendments in the middle. So, consultation. In December 2023, a consultation was conducted with the licensed drivers, determining whether they agree or disagree with the proposed amendments to the tariff charges. Of the 167 licensed Hackney Carriage taxi drivers, 97 drivers responded to the survey. 159 drivers, sorry, that can't be right. No, I need to look at that. But I've certainly got the figures, but I know the percentage is correct. 95.2% of the drivers agreed that the increase was necessary. I was going to say it's my driver numbers that I've put in wrongly, but it was certainly 95.2%. I've got that on a chart. We used our survey system to get that information. And then a public consultation was conducted using the Rochester District Council Engage With Us system between the 31st of January 2024 and the 2nd of March 2024. The survey was received over 400 hits and over 100 responses. From the 110 responses, 31 people said they were very unhappy about the proposed fare increase, and 24 people were unhappy about the proposal. 50% of those that commented were either unhappy or very unhappy about the proposed changes. Therefore, obviously, the remainder was 24 people said that they were very happy to accept the changes, and 20 people were just happy to accept. 11 people provided a neutral response, so they were neither happy nor unhappy about the proposal. There is no financial implication to the council. These are the charges that would obviously be paid for by the public. There is officer time that we'll have to spend about changing the tariffs, getting all the meters changed, liaising with the meter agents, but there will be no financial implication to the council, just our officer time, very similar to what we did at the last increase. This proposal is in accordance with the requirements under Section 65 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act, where it states that a district council may fix the rates and the fares within the district, as well as from time and distance, and all other charges in connection with the hire of a vehicle or the arrangements for the hire of a vehicle to be paid in respect of the hire of a Hackney Carriage vehicle by means of a table. So this relates to the Hackney Carriage vehicles, doesn't relate to the private hire vehicles, but the private hire operators that run both Hackney Carriage taxis and private hire vehicles use the same tariff, because otherwise it confuses the public. So even though the legislation says it only relates to Hackney Carriage, the private hire operators also use this as well for their construction of their fees. In relation to environmental and climate implications, this decision may impact on vehicle emissions but it's really unknown in relation to whether, if you approve it, then obviously the drivers will be going out more to then earn more money, some more emissions on the road. However, then may have a knock-on effect the other way. If the fees go up too much, people won't use the vehicles, and yet then the taxi drivers aren't working as much. So there's two sort of sides of the coin that we need to obviously look at. That if it suddenly becomes too expensive, people won't use it. But obviously, if the drivers are generating more money, then they're going to be out there for longer periods of time. I have attached the two appendixes. One, which is Appendix 1, which is the existing tariffs, which is broken down by a day rate, which is the starting fee is £3, and then it goes up every 440 yards or 2 minutes, whatever is the first. Then it will go up accordingly with the charts underneath. If it's during the evening, Sundays or through bank holidays, that's when the starting rate is then at £5. And then the third rate, which I referred to, which is the Christmas and New Year period, which is double fares. So that's where the three rates that I mentioned before. This is the new chart and proposed chart. It is complicated, which is attached with you. So there is now a daytime rate that is Monday to Saturday. As you see, it's gone up from the previous one was starting rate was £3, whereas this now goes up to £4. Then you've got the early morning, late evening, Sunday and bank holiday rate. Then you've got a late night rate, which starts on the Friday to Monday to Friday from midnight until 4 o'clock in the morning. And then on Saturday, Sundays and bank holidays between midnight and 6 a.m. So that's slightly different to what the current sort of structure is at the present time. They've sort of added an extra sort of late night rate into there. Then they've got the Christmas and New Year rate, and then they've got a separate rate for Boxing Day. Like I say, it's quite a significant change in relation to that. And then the fees in relation to spoilage charges is exactly the same, but they've increased the rate in relation to the costs of luggage and additional passengers. They have increased that by 10p. And for animals to be carried, it's jumped from 40p to £1. So the recommendation is either to approve the proposed Hackney tariff, as you can see on Appendix B, or to refuse the proposal. And I'll leave it to any questions.
Councillor Lawman.
Thank you. As an ignoramus, can you, I don't know if you can, but I'm going to ask the question anyway, because this is all a bunch of figures. I don't use the taxi, so it means not a lot to me, really. But it's sort of blinding me with silence a bit. Are you in a position, the question's to Stephen, if I may, are you in a position, yes or no, that you could give me sort of an average journey and how that equates from the old figures to the new figures? And also, where it says extra charges, it says, for example, extra person. Is that per mile or is that just on the journey?
Okay, I'm going to answer the easy one first. In relation to passengers carried, it's just a one-off fee as soon as they get inside the vehicle. So if it's an animal or a passenger, they pay the 50p is added to the meter slot. It's not then added per mile. It's just a one-off fee that they add on. So that's the easy one. The other question that you asked around, can I easily work out the different costing of what it would have been if they used both tariffs? It depends on the time of day, which makes it a little bit more challenging. What they have done is in the report in the comparison, the taxi trade themselves worked out a journey under 2.36 and 2.37, and then 2.39. It'll be easier if I read that bit out, because that is their sort of breakdown of how they've calculated the difference and what impact that it has. So comparisons with neighbouring councils for a journey, let's say the High Street in Rayleigh to Eastwood Park Drive in Eastwood, which is a 2.9 mile journey. On the Basildon tariff, this will be £9.40. On the Southend tariff, the same journey, with their recent increased fees, it will be £10. While on the current tariff with Rochard is £8.60. Castle Point is similar to us, but I understand that they're currently in the process of a potential fare increase. With this fare increase proposal, the same fare would be £10. So Rochard District Council's taxi fare tariffs currently sits, I've talked about that bit already. So what they're saying is at the moment, for a 2.9 mile journey, at the moment, if we stay on the current tariff, it'll be £8.60. This will push it up to £10. That's the best I can give you.
Thank you. That's about £1.40 increase then. Thank you.
Councillor Efty.
Thank you. That's one of my questions sort of answered. How do we compare with neighbouring authorities? Second one really is, well, a statement is, we've just spent time encouraging more people to go to be taxi drivers, and to run a car, as I know, I don't deliver taxis, I deliver parcels. The price of running a car has gone up astronomically over the last 18 months, 2 years. And we need to reflect that in what they earn, otherwise we're just going to end up whittling away taxi drivers because they will just go to another job. So I'm never happy to put fares up, but I feel I'd have to support this.
Councillor Mrs. Squires-Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. I completely understand the need to increase the fares. I'm just a bit concerned. I mean, I can make sense of this just about, but I'm concerned if I thought of my 80-year-old plus mum looking at this or trying to figure out how much it would cost her to get a taxi. Has any been thought being given into our older residents being able to understand what they will need to pay?
Like I say, this is a proposal that's been put forward by the trade. Like I say, I've looked at the daytime trade, the daytime tariff. Yes, it has gone up from £3 up to £4. So that covers it up until sort of 9 o'clock at night from 6 in the morning. What they have done is obviously they've kept the 440 yards is the first. And then what they've done is at the moment, it is 20p per 175 yards. They're bringing it down to 20p per 170 yards. So it's a 5-yard sort of reduction at a time. So, and the time, yeah, has also dropped as well. Initially it stays at 36 seconds, but then once it reaches above the £9.80, that's when the next sort of tariff bit kicks in. So yeah, like I say, there's lots of complications and lots of calculations that you can work out whether it's daytime, evening and weekend. What they've used in the comparison appears to be the Monday to Saturday daytime calculation.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you. To be honest, I should have read that more clearly. And yeah, most people of an older generation would be using it between those the hours in that first column. So thank you for pointing that out. Thank you.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure that the operators will give a rough cost of the distance travelled and how much it will cost should they be asked to give that price. My question is, the items carried in luggage compartment has gone up 10p from 40 to 50, but when it says for all items, as you very well know, a lot of people do their shopping, they'll have 2 or 3 bags, something like that. Is that for all items, or is it per item bag put in the luggage compartment? And apart from that, I do understand that charges, petrol keeps on going up and down, and so does, well, diesel is supposed to be as cheap, but it's almost twice the price of petrol now. And yes, I do agree that there should be some uprate in the charges, although when you turn around and say that this charge of 2.9 miles will be from £8.60 or £8.80 up to £10, this still won't get the, if you like, the tip that you talked about previously, that they won't get the tip. It will be £10, so they'll pay the £10 without a tip, sort of thing. So I don't know if this is sort of, again, sort of you're cutting your hand off as well as putting the price up. I don't know. Thank you.
Okay, I'll answer the question in relation to luggage carried. It's a maximum charge of 50p, so it doesn't matter whether you've got one bag, you've got 5 bags, it's a maximum charge. The difference that they've got from where it says 40p for animals, that indicates it's extra charge per animal. What they've done this time is that they've said it's a maximum charge of £1. So it doesn't matter whether you carry 3 dogs, 1 dog, it'll be a maximum charge of £1 that they would now charge you. So they've sort of tied the two together as such. So luggage and the animals is maximum set. Yes. In relation to the other question around the credit cards payments, they believe, they've put it in their evidence to support it, that increase will negate the issue that they've talked about in relation to the money that they've lost through the card payments. This is their proposal.
Councillor Cross first, and then Councillor Constable, and then I think we're only doing clarifications at the moment, so I think we should move to a vote after this.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Squires Coleman's observation that elderly people and youngsters wouldn't understand these calculations. It seems unnecessarily complicated to me, but of course the user of the taxi will only see the fare come up on the meter, and that's all they need to be concerned about. My question relates to the complexity of all these variables here. They're changing, you know, the rate per yard, or the duration in which the, you know, it's a two-pronged increase effectively. But this is so complex in comparison to the previous scheme. They must have very sophisticated meters to be able to cope with all these variables. And I'm just wondering how we check and verify that all these parameters and variables are being taken into consideration when we look at whether they're overcharging or not.
I can answer that one because I had to get my head around the chart myself. I spent about 5 hours with the person that proposed it, and then another couple of hours with the meter agent to see whether they could physically do this. So they have worked it all out. Yes, it can be achieved. They can do it on the meter. And then what they do is they set up the system on a chip, and then they copy that chip into all the meters relevant to that make of that meter.
Mm-hmm.
So I've checked, yes, it's not easy, but it is possible, it can be done, and it is very, very similar to the Southend tariff.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Constable.
Yeah, that was part of the question. I often pick up cabs just outside the area. I say I may get an AC cab that's just outside of Rochford. Would they be operated on the Rochford tariff or the Southend? Because AC cabs cover Rochford and there's also AC cabs Southend. So sometimes you might phone an AC cab, but you don't know whether you're getting a Rochford or a Southend tariff. Can you just clarify that for me, please?
Okay, it depends on the vehicle that turns up. If it's a Southend AC vehicle and it is licensed by Southend, they will use the Southend tariff. If it's a Rochford vehicle, then it will be the Rochford tariff. And that, I think, has actually caused a little bit of confusion sometimes within the companies that do cross borders. We've had the same as well within sort of Rayleigh and then Castle Point, again, because you're neighbouring borders of what tariff is being charged. This then sort of brings it very, very close to the Southend tariff. So it doesn't then matter whether it's a Southend vehicle or a Rochford vehicle, it then will be pretty much identical. Providing Southend don't increase their fees again, yes.
Okay, right, we're on the limit of our time, and I don't think we've got any, as Steve explained, it's either a yes or a no on this anyway, despite any clarifications we may still have. So may I move that we approve the Hackney Carriage tariff chart? Councillor Shaw seconds that. Those in favour?
It's unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous, thank you, motion carried. Thank you, this concludes the business for the evening. Meeting is closed at 10 o'clock. Oh, 22.